Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Chris back with I think this is 5. I can't even think of what it is. I think it's 5, but this is going to be the first Adidas graphic from the seller's data that I've been sharing in this series. Since there weren't that many shoes sold, I didn't do a breakdown of what moved through the shop. Now, in a longer report, I can do that, or if you request a report, I can do that if you're a brand. So just let me know, reach out to me, ask for something longer, and I can give you a detailed breakdown of everything that happened in regard to this entire set of data. But this is the thing, all of the product for this seller was acquired via the Adidas outlet at 60 to 70% off the retail price. So the first question, if let's say Adidas says, "Hey Chris, can you talk to us about how this seller was able to do what they did? Why did it happen? What do you think can be improved?" The first question Adidas should ask is, why aren't consumers finding these prices via their channels? In other words, if this seller is able to take products from an outlet, is the brand doing enough to reach the consumer, the intended consumer, right? So that would be the first questions. Why aren't the consumers finding these prices via Adidas's channels? The next question would be why consumers are looking to purchase on third-party platforms when, if they become a part of the Adidas sales funnel, they can find the same deals there. And I think it's an interesting thing to consider that third-party sales are very fragile, reselling extremely fragile. All the sellers or all the buyers have to do is decide not to buy on any platform except the brand platform. And a lot of retail places would be in trouble, and definitely resale places. So here's an important information to note. This seller traveled to an Adidas store during trips to various Nike and other outlet shops. Now, one of the two Adidas stores in a 3-hour radius for this seller closed for underperforming. So this is what I found in my own notes and my own in-store visits. I found Adidas apparel and footwear to be a lot more stylish than any other brand. That's not even an exaggeration. I'm a big Nike fan, as people know. I'm a big Adidas fan too. I like all brands. I mean, the shoes I have on my feet now are New Balance. But I find that Adidas apparel and footwear is very stylish. The assortment of casual apparel and the performance gear that Adidas has, as well as the collab items that are available, it should see the remaining outlet store that's left here in this 3-hour region around the seller. It should see that store perform well. But I've even walked into that store and there's been no one in the store. So customers just trickle in. So let's say if I had to do a ratio on visits to Nike stores that are in the same shopping center, I would legitimately say that the Nike factory store gets 20 visits an hour to 5 for Adidas. 20 to 5. And that might be underselling Nike. So that's at the low end. But the Adidas numbers, there's no lying or no doubt, they can end up getting maybe 5 customers per hour. And it's not because the outlet store, the Adidas store outlet, has some of the best customer service I've ever seen at an outlet store. They have great product, and it's just very kind of strange that the store doesn't do much better. Now, they do have a series of bulk buyers along with this seller. And the seller explained to me that these bulk buyers come in and they get a lot. But that's getting ahead. So this is the surprising aspect of the Adidas outlet stores as explained. The number of collabs and popular styles that were available, Fear of God, Stella McCartney, tons of stuff in there. And it should be noted that when these more premium sneakers kind of get in the store, bulk buyers flood the location. So as few people that go in, bulk buyers know when the product gets there. They go in and they buy every pair of Gazelles and Sambas. But this is what's interesting. Ultra Boost sneakers set. The average consumer went in and bought the Ultra Boost. The Terex sat for a while, and then Adidas knocked the price down on those Terex considerably, and a bulk buyer bought every pair. Now, the store, as far as basketball shoes are concerned, had Don, which is Donovan Mitchell, Damian Lillard, Dames. They had Derrick Roses in there. They had Gil Zeros. They had the Ace basketball shoes. All of those shoes were in abundance up until seasonal basketball. And the prices on those shoes were $19.99 to $39.99. Just great prices overall. For me, if Adidas was like, hey, what's happening with us? I would say that Adidas is missing considerable windows of opportunity across all categories in the U.S. Adidas is missing considerable windows of opportunity. So in the graph that you see next to me here, this is Adidas data 2024, and it's a small set of data. But what can a small set of data from Adidas sales provide information on as it relates to the larger brand? What do we get? And here is my information as I break down the data from this seller. The seller sold 55 items. Resale from Adidas doesn't happen from traditional retail. So if you walk into, during the Yeezy era, you could walk into a store, and if it was a release day, you could buy Yeezy and then flip it in resale. Those times are far gone. You used to be able to do the same thing with NMD, but that's far gone. Those things, it's over. You can't go into a traditional retail and resale. So that makes resale for Adidas a very kind of sparse landscape. More important, it doesn't matter what discount is on the product. This seller said that it was all too risky to hold on to. But 55 is not a bad number for this seller and Adidas. So working from that factory store with over 50 SKUs available at 60 to 70% off, it's still very slow for this seller to take on Adidas. But that's because this seller very rarely got the Terrace Culture shoes, the Gazelles, the Sambas. Very rarely got those shoes. Those were typically sucked up, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go to the next line item, Ultra Boost. There were 20 pair of Ultra Boost sold. Ultra Boost is no longer a fashion shoe. It's not fashion forward. It was for a long time. The Ultra Boost was fashion forward. Sneakerheads wore it. Average people wore it because they saw sneaker culture people wearing it. It was a fashion forward model. It's not anymore. And Adidas never did a very good job of positioning the Ultra Boost as a performance model, and that was a mistake. So the Ultra Boost has a premium price that's off-putting to consumers until it's marked down. But once it's marked down, the Ultra Boost flies off the shelf. That's at retail. Even in a factory store, the Ultra Boost will sell very fast. Very fast. But at 70% off, you're talking about an Ultra Boost, instead of it being at $180, $190, that Ultra Boost is at $79. So that's that's below wholesale. It's below wholesale. So let's go to the next item here that I have with the fire emoji, and that is Terrace Culture. If anyone who was interested in Adidas as a resale product, Terrace Culture is where it's at for those type of people. For Adidas themselves, they know that they invest heavily in soccer, football culture, right? Terrace Culture. At this outlet store, as explained, resellers flood the factory stores when Samba and Gazelles arrive. Why do these sneakers find their way to the outlet is interesting, and it should be questioned. As a matter of fact, the seller stated that the older lady that was buying up all of the Sambas and Gazelles was selling them on Amazon. Now, how was she selling them? I don't know, because Adidas is brand gated on Amazon. So there's some little questions here that you have to ask. But the older lady was selling these shoes at above retail. How does Adidas miss and move those products into the factory outlet funnel? They shouldn't. They shouldn't. They shouldn't be missing at all with terrace culture because it's hot. It's hot. All right, going over here to the side, and we're still talking about the factory outlet for Adidas, and we're looking at collabs. These are the things that were found in the Adidas outlet. Pharrell, Fear of God, Stella McCartney, and an assortment of brand partnerships like Neighborhood, and I think it was Neighborhood, Song for the Mute. Adidas makes this beautiful product, but for some reason, it's not connecting with particular consumers. Where is the disconnect? That's something that I think I know the answer to, and I'm not going to get into that here. But inside of that factory outlet store were collabs. And this is good for you guys who just like shopping and you want to go buy stuff for yourself. You can win. I mean, you can win in a major way. Adidas basketball. Interestingly enough, the Anthony Edwards it never shows up at the Adidas factory stores. It is a shining star, a savior for Adidas. And now they're launching the AE2, and that's good for Adidas. Can't knock it, can't talk about it, can't say anything wrong about it. Anthony Edwards is the savior. Now, the brand rightfully let go of Trae Young. Trae Young shoes were in the Adidas factory store forever, and it wasn't until they got marked down to $19.99 that they even started selling. The Donovan Mitchell line, Spider Mitchell, and Dame, they are not much stronger. Adidas has the weakest collection of superstar signature athletes. And it's tough to say that, but none of their signature athletes except Candace Parker is a champion outside of Kareem. And Kareem is a difficult sell because he was always such a private person. People don't think of him as a GOAT, even though he is. And therein lies a little bit of the problem for Adidas is they lost Patrick Ewing, who never was a champion, but he had an incredible shoe. And Adidas released the Patrick Ewing shoes as the rivalry. So when you see the rivalry, that was originally Patrick Ewing's shoe. Candace Parker's retirement doesn't necessarily hurt Adidas, even though she's a champion. She really didn't move a lot of shoes. It's not that big of an issue. Now, James Harden is interesting because some of his shoes will sell specifically with hoopers. But Harden is barely visible inside of mainstream stores. You rarely see Harden sitting on the shelves at a Foot Locker or anywhere else. It has to be in a major city. Now, the good thing is Harden does not show up inside of the factory outlet store. So his sneakers don't necessarily have great street appeal. This latest one, kind of. Adidas basketball needs a major overhaul and a reinvestment in the sport. Now, what do I mean by a reinvestment in the sport? They do have Adidas Gauntlet. They do sponsor teams. But Adidas is better suited as a true grassroots program. I wish like hell Adidas would come out and say, hey, Chris, what do you think we should do in basketball? Because I think they have focused so much on travel basketball and elite basketball players that they've lost sight of what could really work in basketball, and that's team-oriented products. And I would go into greater detail. Team-oriented products, lower-end players who are not as bankrolled as the big names that they are throwing money behind. But I could go deeper. That's a different discussion. This is the first chart from Adidas. I know it's not super engaging, man. I hope you guys are sticking with me and enjoying this content. Let's move on to the next chart for Adidas. And I think what I'll do is just go into that next chart for Adidas, and then I'm going to move on from the Adidas aspect. So this is a long explanation, but it has to be discussed and explained. When you're using resale as a comp against retail, you have to have a clear explanation. So resale happens at a range of price points. And this is going to be kind of a lesson on resale. And I think there's a lot of people out here who talk resale. They got a lot of money. They just go and buy a bunch of stuff. They open warehouses. In many instances, those buyers tend to overlook certain aspects of the market because they have enough money to sit on items. Now, I'm talking to people who are possibly trying to get into it or who are trying to maintain in a difficult environment. But resale happens at a range of price points. So don't just think about the premium resale. But premium resale is, of course, what most people automatically default to when resale is mentioned. The reality is premium resale, collectibles, sneakers as alternative investments, that level of resale is rare. If you're walking into the arena of resale and you think that's where the business is, you're sorely mistaken. It's rare. Now, mid to high end resale takes a product like Air Jordan 5 Retro Black Metallic, right? That's a general release product with an SRP of 210. Mid to high end resale sees that item gain 11,831 trades on StockX in less than a week, right? The price premium is like 32%, and that makes it an average of $288 a pair. However, that is extremely rare today. The Black Metallic did it, but not many of Jordan brand's retro releases accomplished that type of mid to high end resale value of 32% on an average pair. The majority of resale takes place at the low end. Now I can get the bass and go boom, boom, and that's how you cue a Tribe Called Quest. The low end theory is where most people should be thinking about resale. This is where arbitrage becomes a vital component of the traditional life cycle of retail products. Arbitrage. A product enters the market. It goes on discount after 4 to 6 weeks at 20% off. And this is traditional retail. At 8 to 12 weeks, a product may get an additional markdown. After 12 weeks, sneaker stores place the product on clearance, and you'll get prices from $39 to $69. This process of discounting represents the old life cycle of a sneaker. This is the way it used to take place. That's not the way it is now. The traditional span would be a 12-week process to a lower discount, and then arbitrage would happen. You'd have people come in and buy up all of these shoes that are marked way down, and then they'd mark them back up $20 to $30, and you would win. That means you'd be selling a $39 shoe for $70. You're winning. In today's marketplace, because brands have opened so many of their own doors, you have to imagine Nike almost has a store in every major city. They've opened so many of their own doors in an attempt to capture direct-to-consumer dollars. The lifespan of a sneaker is no longer 3 to 6 months. It's no longer 12 weeks. You don't get that anymore. The lifespan of a sneaker now, because of the amount of shoes being released, is 3 to 6 weeks. 3 to 6 weeks. Arbitrage buyers, the people that buy on those discounts, they have more options to purchase, but so do consumers. The consumer doesn't want to work that hard. But my point is this: because the shopper is being lazy, the consumer is being lazy, this allows the arbitrage seller, that person that used to work on a 12-week schedule, that's now working on a 3 to 6 week schedule, it allows that arbitrage seller to acquire an abundance of discounted product and capitalize on consumer apathy. Very important. They capitalize on consumer apathy. Now, Adidas, because we're in the Adidas section, offers an interesting opportunity to look closely at the data to raise questions about how the brand is operating in the U.S. market. Now, this would be more for Adidas higher-ups who are trying to figure out what's happening in the U.S. for Adidas. Now, in the next graphic that I'm going to show you, I show 2 transactions out of the 55 that the buyer made in 2024. The buyer stopped shopping Adidas in July 2024. They made 33 trips during the 6 months following. The buyer used StockX to sell these Adidas. The buyer didn't keep Adidas in inventory because the store had other older, more aggressive bulk buyers for hot items like Sambas or Gazelles. The seller called these buyers the Golden Girls because they were older white ladies, which is funny as hell to me. The Golden Girls. So the Golden Girls were going in and grabbing these Sambas and Gazelles, and they were buying racks full of these shoes coming down to Adidas in vans. So in this graphic that you're about to see, the numbers above that I just talked about, they established that each visit to Adidas, the buyer sold 1.67 sneakers. In other words, anytime the buyer went to Adidas, they actively went in to try and sell things that were there. They were not buying and holding. So 1.67 sneakers per visit. That's not a large number, but Adidas offers incredible margins. So this is not for Adidas necessarily, but it's more for someone who's talking about getting into resale. When the bids are there, Adidas has incredible margins, but using the store as a warehouse saw very slow sell-through rates. It just was not fast enough. The buyer stopped going, even though the buyer was going to the factory stores. So sales, according to the Golden Girls, were solid on Amazon. The Golden Girls, that's hilarious. The seller that gave me this data tried to sell Dame, Dunn, Trey, Rose, or Ace, which is the Candace Parker, Adidas basketball. The seller said that they had retro, Gills, Zeros. These items were marked down considerably, but the seller couldn't sell those. The seller couldn't sell NMDs, and he couldn't sell Ultra Boost quickly. Not even the forums or Fear of Gods kept bids actively. When sales did happen, the margins were incredible, which means Adidas does have holes in their U.S. strategy. But do these numbers that you're going to see on the graphic, do these numbers illustrate a problem? So we got this graphic, and you've been seeing the graphic this whole time. You've been seeing the graphic. All right. Here's the information. If you're looking over here to the side, and it's hard to see because I don't truly have a mouse, but the seller purchase price, we're here in this chart, right? And that's good. It highlighted it so you can see it a little bit better. So the seller bought Ultra Boost 1.0 ATR, Civilist ZX 6001. The SRP for that shoe was $200 for the Ultra Boost, 70% discount. The Civilist was 120 SRP, 70% discount. The seller paid $60 for the Ultra Boost and paid $36 for the Civilist. Now the return on investment for that seller was 200% on the Ultra Boost. The seller sold that at $180. That's a 200% premium. The Civilist sold for $76, which is 111% premium. Those are fantastic numbers. Fantastic numbers. They didn't happen often enough. But is there a consumer disconnect for Adidas, which is what you see in the picture that's over here to my side? And this is just a resale snapshot. So is Adidas leaving money on the table? That's the question. If so, why? Resale arbitrage typically takes place on products which have reached the end of their product life cycle. Remember, it used to be 12 weeks for a life cycle to end. 90 days is what it usually took for something to get to a retail outlet. That's what I meant. I apologize. The life cycle is now compressed. New products are no longer going through the discount process, so many products are available. Sellers and brands are discounting sooner. Now, this Ultra Boost is an Adidas flagship product. Now, this seller was able to buy multiple pairs from the Adidas factory store and sell the shoes at almost retail on a third-party channel. So a question has to be asked. Why isn't Adidas capturing a consumer willing to pay a premium for products in their own doors? Is this an issue? Of course it's an issue. Of course it is. Okay? When we get into some more information here, I'm going to stop that because that's a lot. I don't want to keep going here. As a matter of fact, the next window is going to look at the most expensive pair sold for this seller in Nike and brand Jordan. And the numbers are not as explosive as you would think. But once again, this seller does not operate in the high-end market very often. And a lot of things simply are not getting there. Okay? But that's the Adidas section. I leave it with a lot of questions, but that's because I really think there has to be people out there asking me questions for me to answer them and give you good, more information, because this is a lot. I know it's a lot. I'm going to stop it because that's long. That's long. And I'll see you guys on the next one. And you already got a preview of what that is. Peace.